Down here in Bray Cove, all this area down in here, you got the back lakes, you got Little Brundit, you got access to Big Brundit if you have the right kind of boat to get there. Otherwise, you have to come all the way around the Ayers to get into that particular area. These back lakes that are here, especially back here in Little Brundit, this is a great little spot that's back here, man. You can run your boat back in there. A couple of different ways you can get to it. Way we've had our water and our tides and everything, we've kind of had the good, the bad, and the ugly over the past week. So we've had a little bit of everything. We've had some super low tides. We've had big tides that's been in here in the mornings and then dropping out in the evening time. So it's kind of been a little bit everywhere. And then we've had cool weather and we have some warm weather. Got more cool weather on the way. So it's just kind of been everywhere, all over the place. But these types of areas like Little Brundit here, you can get back in that and you can stay protected. If you don't mind running, across Mesquite Bay or run the Shoreline, whatever you do, depending on what the weather situation is, high winds, low winds, whatever. It's a great little area to get into. Redfish can get back in this area. You find some trout that's back in here, an occasional flounder, every so often back there in different parts of it, some scattered black drum from time to time. But we've been fishing this area back here a couple of times, and we've been throwing down south burner shads. Water's been somewhat clear back in here, so we've been throwing more translucent color baits, the firecracker, the mud minnow, acid rain, all in the burner shad, white ice, purple rain. All those flavors have been very good back in here, especially in and around our minors and in our transition phase. We're on the backside of a new moon, so the burner shads have been really good. The mid-size has been really good, knocking tails. All those different flavors there have been very good for us. Also, we're full-blown corky season, XL, miradines, soft dines as well. All these baits have been very good for us. There's not one particular size. I'd say probably the burner shads by down south have pushed maybe just a touch ahead of the other baits as far as consistently and productivity goes. But that's primarily what we're throwing there. So that's why that kind of takes care of that. If we'd had maybe somebody just stick to throwing one particular type of bait and then go from that, then that information might be a little bit more spot on, or maybe right now it's a little bit more skewed. But that said, the burner shads have been very productive for us, so there was no reason for us to go away from them. But again, in those flavors, like here in the back of Little Brundit, working down by the pylons or the fence posts that are down on the right-hand side, depending on how you work that. Then back in the opening, then this other back lake that dumps out into this area here. We've been throwing soft dines in this, soft dine XL, Little Johns back in here, especially all that in the more translucent, golden red glitter, kitchen sink have all been good. Been throwing a little bit of top water when the opportunity arises. We've got a little bit more bait, a little bit more activity. Been throwing just to see if we can get some opportunities there, and we've had a few scattered out, but we've had a few. It's a lot of fun if you don't want to get back in those lakes and throw those top waters. But work all the edges. Terrific grass in here, and there's a good amount of bait. And again, you can stay protected back here in these back lakes, like Little Brundit and this little back lake right here off of Bray. You can stay in there, and even if you got a big blow that's coming, 15, 20, 25 mile an hour winds, you get back in here, you can fish it, and it's very easy to work. Bottom's not terribly bad. It's a little squishy. Got good mud, good grass in there, so it's not a problem to deal with all that. Then if nothing's happening there, come on the outside. Get on the outside here in Bray Cove, work the edge, work all the way up to the point, work back around to this way, all the way around this grass area. Work the deeper drops, work the back lake mouths that drop out to Bray Cove. All those have been productive at points in times. You can come back around here as you head back towards Cedar. This whole back shoreline back this way has been pretty productive there by the Texas Parks and Wildlife building that's back in this area here. There's a nice little muddy flat that's out in front of it, and you got some little bit deeper water that's on the other side, and a big old muddy back shoreline that's back there. There's been redfish we've caught back in there. We've caught some decent trout, nothing monstrous, but just consistent. Good fish that are back in these areas. There are fish that are holding. Biggest thing there is, like I said, we've targeted everything around our majors and minors. Very productive during those time frames. Everything in between that and the transition phase, trying to get back to another bite frame, has been, we've been scratching fish out at best. A lot of practice casting. but you can find them. You can locate them if you want to stay with it and stay productive, or stay patient, so you can be productive in these particular areas. The winds have always been a big deal. We got different kind of weather situations coming up toward the end of the week, so make sure you pay attention to what your weather patterns are going to be, what your tides are going to be. Like I say, right now our higher tides have been in the mornings, lower tides been running out here mid-afternoon. So work areas accordingly based on what your tide is doing, so you can find and catch those fish in these areas. Up here in Carlos, all this shoreline here, on the back side of this, you got the old part of the old ICW that runs just off that point here of Carlos, that takes you through the dugout there, Cedar Dugout, and you've got Belding Reef and Belding Lake just on the other side of this area here, which is also another area that you need to be a point of emphasis for you to fish at some point in time. But we're talking about this particular space right through here on Carlos, this whole shoreline. When you got that northeast breeze, this whole shoreline here is really protected for you. A little bit lower tides, you've got a couple little reefs that they hang out here, a little bit deeper water that you can access those when you have the right tide. We've had higher tides in the mornings and lower tides in the afternoon, so it'd be one of those great afternoon spots if you were able to get to it and wait it late afternoon. Catch you a major or minor that may be working during that time frame that would set up well for you. The whole point here, all the way back around and down there on the backside of Dunham. This whole little area here on the backside of this little island right there is a pretty good little spot as well. You got a lot of mud and shell that's in that. So if you do wade that particular area, be safe when you get in there, because it's got some really, really soft mud that you will sink, all the way up to your thighs if you're not careful, depending on where you're at. And if you're fishing by yourself, just make sure that you can access and get out of that, or don't fish it. Get to the other side of it. Work this whole little flat all back in here, this whole back shoreline. You've got a little star-shaped looking little shell reef that's right here, and then you've got this big reef that's on this other side here on the back side of Carlos, and then you got parts of the ICW that pick up and come through this. So when you wade and fish around this area here with this old ICW, be careful not to get too terribly far out to that, because it does drop off fairly deep. You're getting into 18 to 20 foot of water right through probably about a 200 or 300 yard stretch of water. So something to be aware of, especially when that current's really running through there. You don't want to get to a point where it pulls you down like you have a rip current or something to that. So anyway, something to be aware of. Think about that when you're fishing this area back in here, fishing that shale, fishing the mud that's out there, fish this point all the way down to Dunham, this whole back shoreline in here. Again, burner shads have been spot on for us. The knocking tails have been really good for us as well. The original size down south have been good. Again, the water's been fairly clear, so we're really throwing more translucent baits, like the firecracker. The white ice has been good for us. Purple rain's been pretty good. Even though it's a more solid color, it's still got just enough translucentness to it in the belly with the silver flake and stuff that can still set up for you and do well in just a little bit of stained water, but not terribly much, but you can still see down into it. The Little Johns, both in the golden red glitter, have been good. The kitchen sink has been good. Double D's, if you want to throw those double D's in there and really bang that stuff down into that little deeper edge of that and let that bait ascend for you. Of course, the Corkies, Paul Brown Originals, floaters, sinkers, all of them, Fat Boys, they have been, at different points in times for us, have been good. Again, we're primarily throwing plastic 16th ounce jig heads to really allow the bait just to glide for us, let it work. All this area down in here. Also, the Marker 54, the jerk shrimp, has been pretty good as well. I've had a couple of different guys throw that pretty consistently, and have had some pretty good success throwing that jerk shrimp up against the grass line, especially with the higher tides in the mornings right now. And we do all that. So continue to work your shorelines. Pay attention to your majors and minors that are all back in this area here. Just find and locate bait. There's not a tremendous amount of it that's in here, but once you do find it, you'll find some fish that are going to be hanging out around that. So just make sure that you pay attention again to your winds and your tides and what the rain or the weathers are going to be doing in these upcoming days. Newcomb Bend, from the point all the way down in here in the little corner that's down in here. Great little area. You know, it's not a super big area, but you can really kind of stay patient with this area, and you can really work the shoreline, just off shoreline, all the way up toward Holiday Beach. There's a couple of little back lake mouths that dump out into this area that at times, when the conditions are right, again, with our tides, the way that they've been in the mornings, this has been one of the spots that you could hit, wade that area down there to those back lake mouths there. You got some shell that's around it, and then of course, you know, you can get up inside there and fish those areas that are back up in there. We've been throwing a little bit of topwater bait back up in there, especially like that, not knowing what the actual depth is, depending on, you know, what that water level is. So I know it's going to be, you know, knee deep in there, but you also got some pretty soft mud in there, so you don't want to get too terribly far back in there and get yourself in trouble. So we'll throw a topwater bait or another place like here's where your double D would be a great location to throw that thing is there, and then bang it down in there and let it just kind of ascend back up. Again, throwing the topwater baits back in those back lakes, throwing the topwater down the edge of the shorelines like that with that higher water that's in there has been very productive for us. We found redfish stacked up, well, not that stacked up, but we found them pushed up against those shorelines, and we've pulled off a few reds that are here and there. Again, double D's has been good for us. Some seldom, little bit of topwater bait throwing back up in these back lake areas here. We have access to those mouths in there. You can walk up in that mouth just a little bit and throw it back in there, and you'll see bait working in it because it's protected. Now, water's going to be just a tad bit warmer back in there, so those fish are going to be a little bit more active and want to hang out around that, and they're going to hang out around their food source. So once you find and locate your bait, then you can go to work on them. Again, what I've mentioned in the other couple of videos is the burner shads by down south have been spectacular for us. This water back in here has been just a little bit more stained, so we've kind of pushed more toward one of the baits called acid rain. Again, the purple rain has been good for us back in this area as well. The knock and tail greenbacks has been solid. Watermelon red and the knock and tailers have been good. You can throw the, if you like the mirror lures, Little Johns or the XLs, either one, whichever you choose, that's fine. But throw it in the more solid colors back in this areas here, back here in Newcomb Bend as you work around. You can even work offshore out here, probably a couple of 100 yards, still not too deep. But you got some offshore little submerged grass here and there. Not a tremendous amount, but there is a little bit there. Nice soft bottom that you can work, that you'll find some fish that'll be hanging out there, especially if you got bait working. If you got bait that's working out in that little bit offshore water there like this, then give it a go. Throw that XL by Mirror Lure on there. Throw the double D that's in there. Throw your Corkies out in this. Again, we're prime time Corky season right now for the next couple of months for sure, and maybe 3 depending on what our weather patterns do and how cold or warm our weather gets. But throw it for now. They are productive for you. I like the original Paul Browns. You can work those. They're pretty versatile baits. You can work them on like a subsurface topwater bait. You can let them sink down in there. You can rip them. You can float them. Whatever you like to do, but it's a really versatile bait, especially in areas like this. If you want to throw not necessarily a true topwater bait like the She Dog or the Spook Juniors or anything like that, but you want to get a little bit of depth in there, throw the original in there, the Paul Brown original. You can work that thing just below the surface, and when you see the potholes and light them up, you can allow that thing just to kind of dwindle or kind of float down into that pothole like that, and you can find you some pretty nice fish when you can work the technique like that. But again, majors and minors, spot on for us for this past week and a half. They've been all right where we've caught our fish in and around those time frames. So make sure you're really incorporating those into your fishing. Now, again, your bait, the jig heads that we've been using has been 16th ounce, nothing bigger than that. You don't need anything bigger than that, especially when you're throwing the burner shads or you're throwing the Little Johns or the original down souths. All those on that 16th ounce bait allows the bait to really glide down through the water columns, so you can work it in there and get the most production out of this particular area with those particular baits. Again, this particular area here, whenever you got a nice northwest or north wind, it's kind of tough to fish. It's not very protected on that, but if you got more of the northeast, east, or southeast wind, this thing really sets up well for you back in this area. So you just kind of have to pay attention to what your wind direction's doing to determine when that you want to fish back in this area here. But again, make sure that you're finding your keys, paying attention to what your tides are and what the weather's going to be doing to locate and find fish back in here.